Volcanic eruptions triggered ancient Egypt's uprisings during Cleopatra's reign. Well, we know that coming in the image here is a Nilometer. A Nilometer was used to outline the rising of the Nile River, the flooding every year, thousands of years ago, up to thousands of years ago. And this is one of the cisterns that they used to count it. And we recently found that there have been a tremendous amount of volcanic fields in Egypt and Libya, northern Africa, and it may have been disturbed, this whole area may have been disturbed by the tremendous amount of asteroid and meteorite impacts going back to 5,000 years ago, about 3000 BC, if not before. And it may have also been the factor causing a tremendous climate change in the area. This is what the Sphinx of the Giza Plateau looked like when Napoleon went there during one of his campaigns. His artist was always with him, painting whatever they saw, especially these weird, strange objects. And we see that the sand was up to the neck of the Sphinx. It was totally covered by sand. How did all that sand get there? Well, obviously by flooding, by tsunamis, by eruptions from volcanoes such as mud volcanoes. We remember that the ash and the tephra and the tuffs that we saw in the area of Yellowstone, for example, was over 600 and some odd feet thick. 600 some odd feet thick. So this one here being, what was it? What could it have been? Maybe, I don't know what the height of the Sphinx is. Let's say 50 feet, 100 feet, I doubt it, but it was covered up to its neck. So the tephra, the flooding, the tsunamis, here it is again, up to the neck. That's how Napoleon found it. Now, who is Cleopatra? The original Cleopatra was actually Alexander's sister. He had a sister named Cleopatra. And when the Alexander the Great, during his reign, took over the whole land, the whole known land, we're talking about Greece, he even put an end to the Persian Empire. He took over all the known land, even Israel and Egypt. Egypt even claimed that he was a pharaoh. He was actually the biological son of the Pharaoh Nectanebo, one of the last original pharaohs of the last lines of Egypt. He had to flee because there was an uprising. He fled to Macedonia, to the area of Salonika, which is today northern Greece, to the castle of the palace of Philip. Philip was away on campaigns, and he left his queen alone, and when he came back he found her pregnant. It said that Nectanebo pretended he was a warlock, and that he was always infatuating Alexander's mother Olympias, and would go to her after giving her potions to make her drowsy and sleepy, narcotic potions, go to her at night saying that he was a god and that he had relations with her. And that's why she kept on explaining to Philip that her son is the son of a god. When Alexander went to Egypt, he asked the high priests of Egypt there if he was a god. And they said, yes, you are a god, because they knew he was the biological son of Nectanebo, the last proper pharaoh of Egypt. Now, after it was also prophesied in the book of Daniel that there would be the little horn, that is, it would put an end to the Persian Empire, and he did, and that the prophecy said his kingdom would not go to his heirs, but it would be divided into four, and it was divided into four towards his generals. We know that during the book of the Maccabees, they had a terrible time trying to bring back the temple of Jerusalem to its rightful lineage of priests. and they did that within 3 years. That's why Hanukkah is celebrated in December. The Feast of Lights, Hanukkah, was when they put an end to the ancient Greek ruling over Egypt, and they took back the temple from them. So Cleopatra was the first queen, the original sister of Alexander the Great, and since then it went on to about the time of about 30 BC, the time of Mark Antony. Now, all right, let's go to the beautiful stories of her. Cleopatra, the civilization culture of ancient Egypt. She was not Egyptian, she was ancient Greek. That's why they say they were speaking Greek in Egypt. That's why when various people heard the Apostle Paul speaking Greek so well, they said, "Are you Egyptian?" And he said, "No, I'm Hebrew and I'm a Roman citizen." And but he spoke Greek very well, you know, he was educated, and they thought he was Egyptian because they used to speak Greek in Egypt. It was one of the languages they spoke in the whole area. That's why the sign over the crucifixion of our Lord Jesus Christ was in 3 languages. It was in Greek, Hebrew, and Roman. So the official language there was Greek, and then it was changed to Latin, to Roman. Now, the interesting facts, information about the Queen of Egypt, Queen Cleopatra, the dynasty and period when she reigned was between 51 to 30 BC. She had a relationship with Julius Caesar and with Mark Antony. Fact-based biography, her famous suicidal death from the poison of an asp. So the overview of the life. She was Queen Cleopatra the 7th, by the way. She was the 7th. She was the most famous of all the queens of Egypt, and she was the mistress of Julius Caesar and the wife of Mark Antony. Cleopatra was very well educated, clever, ambitious, extremely attractive, lethal combination of a woman for any man, extremely determined. Her family embroiled in power struggle and realized that if she could persuade Julius Caesar to give her a claim to the throne of Egypt, his support, and then she would become Queen of Egypt. Well, you know, she did all this because she wanted to have, you know, her empire was falling apart. And she wanted to have a very strong relationship with the leaders of Rome so that she would have peace. All right? That's basically the crux of it. Now, evidence changes the atmospheric chemistry and the social stresses uprising against the ruling elite. The atmospheric chemistry of the death in ancient Egypt. Evidence emerges that links volcanic eruptions with social unrest and disruptions having to do with climate changes, disruption of the rainfall, the droughts, the Nile not having enough water, not flooding enough, and not giving produce to the people. This in turn led to rising food prices, riots, even open revolt against the Ptolemaic dynasty. Ptolemaeus was one of Alexander the Great's friends since he was a toddler, really. You know, since he was like in elementary school, let's put it that way. You know, that Ptolemy and Nearchos and other ones as well. Now, the climate scientists and historians and archaeologists recently uncovered strong relationship between major volcanic events and the low water levels in the Nile River. The Nile's annual flood historically was crucial, as we know, even today, for agriculture. When flooding was lighter than usual, there were severe droughts, a severe lack of produce, lack of agricultural products, even livestock, and social pressure as well, as harvest failed. The Ptolemaic era was from right after the death of Alexander the Great at 305 BC until the death of Cleopatra at 30 BC. And this is what documents reveal, often culminating when civil unrest and rebellion against authorities of the Greek kings who ruled Egypt at that time. That's why Cleopatra was very eager to have a very strong relationship with Rome so they could support her in every way possible, and her kingdom, right? So this was the survival of Egypt, which of course failed and became part of the Roman Empire. So volcanoes can inject millions of tons of sulfur gases into the atmosphere, also poisoning the land, the soil, the water, and they form a layer of tiny liquid aerosols like talc. That's what they want to do this year. The Harvard University want to spray us with talc and lower the sun's rays coming to the earth. So the aerosols that scatter sunlight back into space. And the researchers in Colorado who were involved in this project said these particles can remain in the upper atmosphere for several years, reducing sunlight and temperatures of the Earth's surface, changing rain patterns, rain flow, rain precipitation, including the southward shift of monsoon regions in the eruptions of the northern hemisphere. We also have ice core studies from the Greenland and Antarctic to provide records of major volcanic eruptions throughout humans' history. So they also tell us what took place there. Once these tiny volcanic ashes drift back into the ground, into the snow, and into the ice sheets, they leave a pristine record of what those major eruptions looked like when they took place. The sulfur usually indicates contribution from marine biogenic sulfur emissions. That ocean emits a lot of sulfur. And then we have the water meter in the Nile, as we saw in that picture in the beginning, to understand the impact on volcanic-driven shifts in rainfall concerning the Nile River. A team led by Trinity College Dublin, Francis Ludlow, compared the historic record of the Nile's water level, known as the Islamic Nilometer, with chemical tracers of volcanic activity locked away in the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. So they correlated this. The Nilometer on Ronda Island in Cairo has a chronicle of the Nile's high water mark stretching back to 622. It's an actual fully quantitative measurement, and it's a beautiful fixed climate record, often weirdly overlooked by climatologists. And when they analyze this Nilometer data from this construction, this building, alongside the ice core data, the Ludlow team found a clear link. He said, in these eruption dates, and we looked at about 60 of them, you can see big decrease in Nile summer flooding in those years. In fact, in eruption years, the summer flooding was on average 22 centimeters lower than in non-eruption years. 22 centimeters, that's about what? A good foot, a foot and a half. Having modeled the Nile's recent response to volcanic events, the team then looked back in time to the Ptolemaic era. That's around, of course, the time of Cleopatra. That's a period stretching from the death of Alexander the Great to the time of Cleopatra VII, one of his relatives. Polar ice cores extracted from the depths of several hundred meters allowed the team to date volcanic events, and therefore the low Nile over the last 2,500 years. And by looking through all this, the ancient documents and researchers found that these dry cycles were strongly associated with periods of revolt in ancient Egypt and lack of funds to go wage war with its rivals. So it was a house divided. The Hellenistic Egypt points that in addition to the impact of the climate, the Ptolemaic ruling family was a fractured one. Discord at the top was likely also a factor. Ethnic tensions between the immigrant Greeks and the native Egyptians, another ruling, because Greeks were, of course, the invaders. While from the 2nd century BC, the growing threat of Rome and the new Mediterranean superpower added to this Ptolemaic dynasty's problems. So the study shows that this is probably what did all this. Because when you have a population that is thriving, it has food, clothing, it's all its fundamental needs, it would not have a social uprising against the rulers. And that's why, of course, Cleopatra was really adamant and had all these weird relationships with whoever was ruling in Rome, intimate relations, in order to gain their protection for herself and her country, to gain their promise of protecting them. And of course, what happens is that after Cleopatra dies, let me go back to after Cleopatra dies, that's the end of the Egyptian kingdoms. And that's the beginning of the Roman Empire under the Caesar of Rome. And now we know that she also had the Caesar managed, it said, to hold the palace and the harbor of Alexandria, captured the eunuch who he executed as a traitor. Young Ptolemy was allowed to join the army of the general Achilles. Caesar ordered the burning of the Egyptian fleet. Okay, that's, all this stuff. I'll leave a link below for you for this. Either before or after, soon after Caesar left Egypt, Cleopatra bore him a son, who she called Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. This firmly linked the queen with the power of Rome. And then we have the fact that she took on with Mark Antony after that, believing, he's fooled into believing his wife has committed suicide and falls onto the sword. Now, to avoid being paraded in Rome as a captive queen, she took her own life. She was 39 years old when this happened, and the death of the most famous queen of Egypt also saw the death of the last dynasty of Egyptian rulers. Egypt became the province of Rome. So in conclusion, we have to be very careful with volcanic eruptions, social unrest. Of course, it means ashfall and poisoned water and soil and lack of food and lack of water and everything. Emaciated people, social uprisings. This is to be expected. So that's the conclusion of that. We have to be careful. That it did happen, it does happen, and it will happen again. So I'll leave links below for you for this. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Cleopatra, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.